am just bursting with excitement to have this interview with Patti today. I have actually been begging Patti for months to interview her in our virtual masterclasses. And she is such a busy woman that it has been impossible to get her until now. So you'll see if you go to Patti's Facebook page that she is what we say a sought after keynote speaker, which I have certainly experienced since I've been seeking after her for a few months. She is an international top-selling author, professor, and CEO of Move It Nation, and her work focuses mostly on health, equity, and building inclusive spaces. So I think those are incredible things to have said about you, Patti, and I know they're all true. And I think just another reason, though, why I really wanted to interview you is just because who you are. I think who you are is someone who lives everything that you teach others. And I think anybody who has spoken to you or been with you knows that you engage authentically yourself. And you really give others permission to be the same and to do the same just because they're with you. And that's what I really love about you. And that's why I'm just super excited to interview you on this topic today, because it's so key for interviews. And I know that your work and your research is really going to be able to help people who are interviewing others to create that safe space. So if the others, thank you for putting yourselves on mute. That's very helpful. What we'll do is we'll chat to Patti for about half an hour, 45 minutes. And then we'll ask everyone to unmute and we'll have a discussion, and you can please make your comments, ask any other questions that you may have. But for those who don't know me, my name is Jane Moores, and I'm with Otterbox Thinking with Reinhard Moores, who's actually away camping, but you can see his photo there. True to his photo, he's out camping with our son. But we focus mostly on coaching. We coach people globally. And we focus on helping people to be the best at what they are, find meaning and purpose in their work. And I train a lot of companies on how to hire the right people and how to help candidates walk away feeling courageous and respected. That's very close to my heart, whether they're right for the role or not. So important to have that positive candidate experience. So Patti, I've said a couple of lines about you. So if you could please start off by telling us a little bit more about what you do and the kind of work you've done, just so that everybody is filled in on that. Welcome, welcome. So happy to have you here.
I am bursting. I am overjoyed to be with all of you, and especially you, Jane. And I'm very thankful for technology that you can be in Cape Town, South Africa, and I can be in the backyard of New York City, and we can connect so easily. So I'm so grateful for that. So I most often consider myself a researcher with a social justice focus. And the reason I do that is because I believe that in everything I do, it's important for us to have a sense of morality, a sense of what's right, and a desire to do great things in this world. I believe that everybody has a purpose, and we're not just here to float and make money, but it's about really growing and discovering our purpose and really living that out to the fullest extent while we're here. So I love what I do. I study racial and ethnic health disparities at Rutgers University in New Jersey. And really what that means is I look at health through the lens of culture, and I try to uncover why there are differences in different groups of people. Most recently, my work has involved corporations and consulting with businesses around inclusion. And it's obvious because of what's going on in the world, lots of racial strife. It's always been there, but I think because of the accessibility of phones, now we're able to see some of the things that really has been happening for decades and maybe even centuries. And so one area that I'm very focused on right now and building a body of work around is around stress and how workplace wellness is so important, and ways in which organizations create stressful situations for their staff and their employees, that is a problem because it definitely affects their bottom line. And so you put all this training and time into a staff member that does not feel valued and appreciated. They end up leaving maybe to their competitor with all the training and time that you put into them. So my focus now is I've been a consultant with several companies and organizations and just really striving to help them create a space that's inclusive and also that focuses on well-being so that they can be productive at the end of the day.
Love that, Patti. And I mean, I really resonate with what you're saying around people being here for a purpose and that we need to live out our purpose and live out our design. So I hear you saying that. And then I also hear you talking about stress specifically. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about what motivated you to do more work around the area of stress and how that links to people's performance and well-being in general.
Well, actually, I had an experience personally. I have a personal story, and most people do have a personal story when they share about their purpose. And so I had a personal story where I was at an organization and the environment was extremely stressful. I didn't realize it. And I think it's because most of us, we're just happy to be working, especially these days. We're just happy to be really focused and in our industries. We're just excited to be there. And I think in the name of that, I did not realize the effect it was having on my body and my mind. And it wasn't until I started, slowly like forgetting things that I never would forget, like keys and things of that nature. And actually it affected me to the point where I was actually on a weekly basis throwing up, which I hadn't done in years. And so I didn't understand the way it was affecting me until I went to a doctor, and the doctor asked me, is there anything new that's happened in your life, any changes? And then I remember that I had just started this new role. And I realized that it wasn't actually the responsibilities of the role, it was the environment that I was in, and to some degree, the people that I was surrounded by. And shortly after that, when I left that organization, since then, I have not had any problems, all the challenges I had left. And I haven't had any of those physical or mental problems that I had before, any feeling that I had that I realized later was stress. And so what I decided to do was really focus in on that. And as a researcher, I love discovering things and figuring things out. And some of the things that I've learned is that when you are in a stressful situation, your body does not recognize it right away. But when it happens on a daily basis and you're consistently in that environment, it does have an effect on you physically and emotionally. And I noticed it when I completely removed from that area. And so there is evidence that shows that in the workplace, in corporate environments, people are under tremendous stress. They're going in every day stressed. They are burdened by the work that they're involved in, but also by the environment. And so there's a lot that organizations can do to create a space that focuses on the well-being of their employees. And there's also a lot that employees can do to make their health a priority.
So Patti, you're talking about the stress that's not just related to the role and to what somebody has to do, but really to the environment and the people around them. So is this around how people treat you, or is this around a kind of mismatch in company culture, feeling uncomfortable there? What are the kinds of things specifically that you think produce stress when it comes to environment and people?
There's so many different factors. So a lot of it is the organizational culture. Culture is everything. I read a quote that said that culture is tolerable behavior. It's the behavior that is accepted in your work environment. And that just really struck me. And if there's a behavior that is tolerated in your workplace, that's the culture of your workplace. And so that communicates to your staff, your employees, that this is acceptable. And that can be a range of things on the spectrum. That can be issues around gender, around how people are treated, around identity. It can really also be around race. And that is really an area that I'm focused on, race-based stress, microaggressions, comments that are made in a racial tone and undertone. It could be anything around religion. It could be even comments about class, slighted comments. And so the thing that I've noticed is individuals, they don't realize that they're creating this environment until it's too late. And so I think it's just very important for corporations to recognize some of these signs. And also it's important for them to pay attention to this because we're in a very litigious time. And so, those that are feeling that they're in a hostile work environment could easily pursue legal matters to get their issues resolved. But I think more than that, it's important that organizations really create a space so that their employees can thrive. Because if they are not feeling valued, they will leave to another place where they will feel valued. And so in terms of stress, it can be a range of things, but most often it is an environment that is accepted and tolerated at the highest level. And so what I try to share with higher leadership in organizations is this isn't something that's going to change by bringing in a trainer and do a one-time professional development. Check it off your list, and we've done it. We've had our mandated training for the year, and let's continue making our products or moving forward with our business or our services. But this is something that needs to begin at the foundational level. It really needs to start with conversations, and the person leading the charge needs to be higher leadership. As an example, showing how important and relevant these issues are. Again, culture is tolerated behavior. And so it's important for leadership to show that this is not tolerated at this level, and really to show this not just in their behavior, but also in their guiding documents, their mission statements, and especially in their HR manuals. In one of my roles as a professor at the university, I teach a leadership seminar to undergraduate seniors. So these are students that are finishing with all of their training of K through 12, from kindergarten all the way through high school, and they're finally about to graduate and step into the working world. And one of the things we talk about is really preparing them for their next chapter. And I share with them, when you step into a new organization, you need to examine their guiding documents. What do they stand for? What are their values? Where do they spend their money? What services or organizations or nonprofit organizations are they supporting? You need to know what the standard is and what's tolerated. If you're going to align yourself with an organization or company, you need to know what they stand for. And so I encourage my students to explore and ask questions of those HR documents and those guiding principles, because that is an indicator of what that organization stands for.
I think that's so true, Patty. And I think what we've also seen during the pandemic is an increased focus and awareness on that by candidates who are applying for jobs in organizations. And I think where they've taken it further now is to say, okay, that's what's documented. That's what's on your website. That's what's in your policies and processes. But how are you living this out? Is this actually supported in terms of rewards, recognition, incentives, and as you say, what's actually tolerated as behavior in an organization? So people want to see it lived out now. And I love what you're saying about how the stress is almost linked to, from what I'm understanding, what you're saying, it's linked to that feeling of, I don't fit in. I don't feel accepted for who I am. I don't feel that I can be my real self. I don't have the courage to be authentic. Because if I am authentic, then I'm not accepted. So, and that is tiring. That is stressful to continually try to be someone else. So I hear you on that, and I think that's so key. I think more and more people need to hear about that research and those facts. And I like what you're saying about leaders need to encourage people, that they need to be able to put that into the culture from beginning till end in their employee experience. And from the work that I do in helping clients to hire the right people and create that experience in an interview, I think that's such a key point for me to always remind my clients, is how are they allowing people to be themselves in an interview? Because if they're not themselves, firstly, they might be hiring the wrong person, but also there isn't a real sense of, does that person fit into the real culture as it is, not just as it's documented to be. So in an interview situation, what, kind of based on your research and based on what you're saying, what advice or insights would you give to interviewers to create a space where an applicant feels that they can be themselves, they can be authentic in an interview?
That's a great question. I know that in America, it's completely legal to ask general questions in terms of just questions to get to know a person's personality that might not be related to the content of the industry. I know that around the world that may not be the case, particularly in South Africa, from what I understand. So I think it's important that interviewers have a varied experience, and they also have a varied examples of questions that they can ask. You really want to make sure that the individual that you're interviewing is able to show who they are outside of just their resume. We're more than the one sheet of paper that we present when we apply for a position. We are more than that. We are much more than just one page. And so I would be thinking as an interviewer, what can this individual share with me about themselves that's not on this resume? How can I craft questions that will help them to stretch their thinking to share more about who they are as an individual? I think that is so important. It's very critical that organizations really feel one with those that they are interviewing, and also vice versa. We see this when we're looking at different organizations, especially now in COVID. Everyone is home. I mean, look at us right now. We're all home. The lines between home and office has completely blended. And so we're all in our home. So being authentic is everything. It's everything. And I think that one area that we definitely hold back is behind the screen. Now, behind the Zoom screen. Now, I have heard two arguments around this. Some people that I have spoken to in terms of interviews, they feel safer at home interviewing. They feel more confident, and they also feel more courageous to be themselves, mostly because they're in their actual home. They're in their home. So that's a place where we already feel comfortable. And I have spoken to some individuals, employees, that have shared with me that when they are in the environment of the actual corporation, on site at the facility, they don't feel as confident. And so I think that's another area of research that I'm looking into, how space has an influence on our courageousness and our ability to be ourselves. And so I think now is the time. I would say for interviewers, really strive to ask questions that will help the applicant explore who they are and share more about who they are that's not just on that resume. And I would say for interviewees, take advantage of being at home in your safe space, your cocoon, and being able to be bold and to be yourself, because this is it. This is your home. There's no other place that you would feel safer to be who you are. And so I think this is a tremendous opportunity for individuals who are starting their own business, individuals who are starting to branch out in consulting, and individuals who are applying for positions to be bold. Now is the time to really show who you are and to have self-confidence in your product and in your service.
I love what you're saying about self-confidence, Patti, because I think we were speaking yesterday about how self-confidence is such an attractive quality. And I think it's something that I've always known you to have over the many years that we've known each other and, been great friends, actually. For those of you who don't know, Patti and I are also great friends. But but Patty, I've always known you as somebody self-confident. I mean, you just exude it. So maybe you can share with us what helps you to feel and exude that self-confidence, because that is something that is so attractive for somebody who's wanting to hire someone. If they see that person being self-confident, they're drawn to that. And I think as well, for an applicant applying to an organization, if they see an interviewer who is self-confident, then that for them reflects that that person is happy in their role, enjoying the organization, and can be who they really are. Yeah. So what helps you be self-confident?
You know, as you ask me, I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, where does that come from? I'm thinking, okay,
No,
where
you
does my
really are.
confidence come from? But the first thing I thought of was, I don't know about in South Africa, but in America, who you are at work is completely intertwined with who you are as a person, to the point where when you go out to social events and people ask you, what's your name? And you meet someone, the next question is, so what do you do? That's the very next question. So what do you do? And already they make an assessment of who you are based on what you do.
Mhm.
And so that is what it's like in most corporate settings here. And so there is this sort of intertwining of your job, your day-to-day, and who you are as a person, which really isn't right, because we're so much more, we're so much more than what we do for 8 hours a day. There's a whole other few, hours to that day. And so it's unfortunate that that is the standard around the world in many places. Like, who you are is just reflective of the work that you do. Because, I really believe that our work can have nothing at all to do with our job. We're fortunate if our work is our job, but I believe our work is our purpose. Our life's work is our purpose. It's the reason we were put on the planet. It's the reason that we are here. It's the reason that we have the skin that we have, the skills that we have, the talent that we have, the hair that we have, and no one else has that. That who we are is completely unique, and there's no one else like us. Even if you have identical twins, which I have triplets, there's no one else like an individual. And I think it's important for people to embrace who they are, that is their quality, that there's no one like them. And they were put on this planet for a purpose. And so that purpose is their life's work. It's not their job. Their job
Yeah,
is
I love that, Patty.
it's what we do to have a means to be able to afford our lifestyle. But that's not our life's work. Our life's work is so much deeper than our job that we check in for 8 hours and leave. And so I think it's important for people to get in touch with what their purpose is, what their passion is, and really understand who they belong to, what they stand for, and what their purpose is. And so that really is the source of my self-confidence. Is I know who I am, I know whose I am, I know what I'm here to do. And so whether I am in the professor role or in a consultant role or in the role that I had before, which wasn't for me, I am grateful for that role, because it gave me the opportunity to be able to share from a personal story. And so I believe that when you have an idea of who you are and what it is that you were put here on the planet to do, that purpose is so much bigger. And that's where we get our self-confidence from. And we see it in individuals when they lose their job, or perhaps they were laid off or retrenched, as we say, right? If they were, which is not that's the total South African term. We don't use that term here in the States. But if someone is retrenched, we see, oh, absolutely, you're gonna miss the people you were with, you're gonna miss those relationships that you've had for decades, but you still have your purpose. You still have your life's work. And unfortunately, we have seen terrible, tragic examples with individuals who have intertwined their lives with their work. And when something happens and they're retrenched and they lose their job and they no longer have that, we have seen terrible examples of things that they've gone and done to their bosses, to their workmates, as a result of not having that position anymore, because they somehow feel less of a person. They feel like they don't have anything. But if you are in touch with who you are, your purpose, your job might change, your role might change. but the self-confidence that comes from knowing who you are, whose you are, what brought you to the planet, and what you have to do, that will always remain the same. And I think it's just important that we identify that, and we really strive to let that be our guiding principle.
I agree with you, Patty. And I think because I also train people who are going for interviews on interview skills and how to answer certain questions. And in line with what you're saying, there's such a difference when people have a passion and a purpose around what they're applying for and how it connects with their design and what the difference they really want to make in the world, as opposed to just applying for a job because they have to do something. There's just, I actually was speaking to somebody earlier this week, and she was applying for something that really aligns to who she is. And it was just chalk and cheese from when I'd seen her before. She just was lit up and energized. And so often an interviewer will sense that. And the same when the interviewer is interviewing somebody for a role and they reflect that energy and that purpose in the interview, people are attracted. They want to join that organization. We know that 4 out of 5 candidates judge the company's whole culture just by their experience with that interviewer. But Patty, please tell us a little bit more, because I know that, you referred to who you are, you specifically referred to hair, which is, I'm glad that you did, because I know that also relates to some such valuable, meaningful work that you've done, where you've seen how stressful it is when people don't feel comfortable with who they are. So please tell us more about the work you've done in that area, and yeah, just because that's also part of being authentic.
It's so exciting because that's a conversation that's happening right now in America, particularly among Black women. And the conversation is, can we be ourselves on Zoom? Can we show up to a Zoom meeting with our hair maybe even wrapped in a head wrap or in a bonnet, like, with a fabric or like a protective cloth on it? Or can we just show up with our hair like this? Because this is my hair. It just grows this way. Does our hair have to be straight? So this is an ongoing conversation among women with curly hair, not just Black women, but women with curly hair. So across the diaspora, whether they are Cuban or Brazilian or biracial. And so this is the current conversation. And so I have done quite a bit of research on hair, and I often get, what, hair? But what does it have to do with anything? But I love talking about hair. Most people do not know that hair, to me, is one of the few unifying objects that can unify an incredibly diverse community. That's something that we all have in common. And so I use hair as a starting point to really start to bring about conversations around race, culture, ethnicity, inclusion, because everyone can relate to that. That's something that we can all talk about. But most recently, in the last several years, I have written and published work in academic journals and peer-reviewed journals around hair harassment. And that is hair discrimination, where Black people of African descent, men, women, students, have been discriminated against because of their hair. And this is not new. Again, this has been going on for decades. However, what is new is there is finally legal protection in the form of the Crown Act in various states in America. It's not a national act, but it is in 8 states across the country. And I know that there are other countries besides America where people can be protected. So it's still legal if your hair is not groomed or in the way and styled in the way that an organization would prefer, that they could fire you. There's still states in America where you could be fired if my hair looks like this, just like this. I could be fired. I could lose my job if my hair looks like this. This is totally legal in many states. I'm very fortunate. I live in a state where this is not the case. New Jersey, New York City, California, some of these states, it's totally illegal, and we can pursue legal action, but it's still totally illegal in many states in America. And so the reason that this is important is because our hair is a representation of our culture, for some, our religion, And this would be the same thing as perhaps you, Jane, being fired for wearing bangs or wearing your hair straight, or being told now you have to wear it curly because,
Yeah.
you know, this is curly hair is more acceptable at this particular job. And not just here, but across the provinces. Can you imagine if they would not allow you to wear
So
your hair?
offensive. I mean, goodness.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
your
what
hair.
has that got to do with who I am inside? I mean, yeah.
Exactly. So it would be like someone saying you cannot wear your hair straight, even though your hair grows straight. That's exactly what's happening right now, today in
Yeah.
America. And so it's important that organizations understand that, because if you're in the wrong state or particular other parts of the world where there is protection, they could have a lawsuit on their hands. And it's important for applicants that are being interviewed to understand that if they are treated differently because of their hair, there is a legal pathway that they can pursue in the form of the Crown Act. And personally, I do know consultants and those in policy, lawyers that have fought for this act and continue to fight for this act across America. So that is really the history with hair. I think for Black people, hair has extreme significance. It's not just a hairstyle, but as I said before, for some, it's a religious reason, it's a cultural reason. And I know this is true in Africa. And so this is an area of concern because it creates a environment that could be, what's the word I would say? It could be an environment where individuals will not feel included, or it would not be a space where they would feel like they belong. And so that is a problem for organizations, and they should be aware that that is a concern.
Yeah, totally, Patty. And I think the word that stands out for me that you used there is how people feel. And I think, as we were chatting about yesterday, those famous words of Maya Angelou in "People don't remember what you did; they remember how you made them feel." And so there, because I mean that sense of being unaccepted, yeah, it's emotional, and that's what people walk away, and that's what stays with them. And as you say, that can impact their stress levels, their performance, their well-being on so many levels. And so, yeah, I mean, I think coming back to interviews, which is my space that I tend to move back to all the time, is how do employers make someone feel in an interview? And often it's how comfortable they make them feel that they can be themselves. I actually posted an article in the chat box that I shared on LinkedIn recently around how some interviewers deliberately put candidates under stress in an interview. They kind of play this good cop, bad cop game because they think that that's going to give them an indication of how a candidate can handle stress in the workplace, which is faulty within itself. I know there's a couple of industrial psychologists with us, but for example, I mean, goodness, that is not a valid psychometric assessment. The person is already nervous in the interview, and how they handle an interview is not necessarily an indication of how they handle stress in their work. Plus, I mean, I heard of somebody who told a story, and she said, oh, you know, she was in the situation, she was treated this way, whether they were trying to just assess her stress levels or not, made her walk away and say, because of how I felt in that interview, even if I get a job offer, which she did, I'll decline it, which she did. So it has such an impact on the personal and professional brand. It goes back to what you're saying about culture, what behavior is tolerated. But yeah, in an interview, it's about how you make people feel. And so often, actually, now even speaking about hair, Patty, that's something that candidates often speak about. They say, Jane, how should I wear my hair for the interview? That people are aware that it's something that could make them more acceptable or not in other people's eyes, depending on how biased, consciously or unconsciously, that interviewer is. I love your work. I think that's so meaningful. That's so courageous. And it touches on something that others might have just thought, oh, it's just hair, but really not.
You know, and I think too, it's important for employers to understand that this is very powerful. The phone, the phone is very powerful. And so after leaving an interview, anyone can just write on social media today, especially on Twitter, about the experience. Oh my goodness, if they wrote about feeling perhaps some racial microaggressions in the interview, that's all it takes. Today, this is such a powerful tool, and it can also be a powerful weapon. And so to be accused of really not creating and even condemning inclusion really could be detrimental to any organization, because all it takes is for one interviewee to go onto Twitter and to be able to say anything about that organization. And there goes the reputation that has taken so long to build. And we've seen that. We see that all the time. We see organizations coming out with statements because they were accused by one person. All of a sudden, their PR, they have to scramble and come up with something and institute training. We see that in America all the time. We unfortunately, this is a huge problem. But I do think that it's important for organizations to recognize that the way they treat their current employees, but also those that are prospective employees, is so important, because we are living in a society where the power is not what it used to be. It's not just with that organization. In fact, they might be surprised to know it's with the applicant at the end of the day. So I think it's important for them to keep that in the back of their minds as well.
So true, Patty. And as you say, it starts with leadership and what they tolerate in the organization. And so that kind of top-down approach. And I think you were even mentioning in our previous chat about how the world has to become less hierarchical, and how interviews, even though, we talked about how in South Africa it needs to be a lot more structured from a legal perspective. We have a lot of emphasis on fairness and on equity, of course, because of our horrible past in South Africa. So I think that's right. But even though it's structured, it doesn't mean you have to show up as a robot. It means you can still have a structure, but in a conversational way that reflects humility and that reflects curiosity, and where the interviewer themselves is authentic. I think you made such a good point in our last chat about how with COVID and people having virtual interviews, it's so much harder to gauge the culture through the screen and the virtual presence. And we talked about how important storytelling is then, because storytelling is a way of being able to explain a culture, and the interviewers experience themselves in that culture, for the applicant to be able to understand without being able to visit those offices physically. So
because here's the thing: if you're interviewed and you won't be able to be on site, let's face it, all of us are home. Most of us are home. Most people around the world are home. They have not been on site of their actual role, perhaps for a year. For some, it's been a long time. And in that time, if someone has been hired, the first thing that they will probably do is Google the organization. That's what I would do. You Google the organization and try to find out information about this company, corporation. Who is it that I'm a part of? Should they find some disgruntled employee information, that would be detrimental to the company. And so it's extremely important, especially now, because we are at home. And we're seeing this a lot in New York. It's unfortunate. One of the areas of research I'm actually going to be speaking about in about 2 weeks is just the way essential workers, those that are considered essential, the employees that have been really moving our lives while we are safe at home, the bus drivers, the train drivers, those that are delivering our mail, all of those individuals, also not to forget the healthcare professionals as well. And there's a huge conversation right now in my world of public health around how these essential workers are being treated, and in terms of what they should be getting from their employers. And so it's important that as we are relaxed and comfortable and safe in our home/office, that we recognize and appreciate those that are out there that are really moving our lives for this whole year. And that everyone, whether they are on site or at home, really deserves to be working for an organization that is giving them the respect that they deserve in terms of their benefits, in terms of the way they're treated, in terms of all of the areas that will make them stay. And at the same time, we have seen examples where individuals have not felt respected or appreciated or valued. They're at the table, as we say here, and they have left and started their own business. And to their credit, these businesses, these COVID businesses, have now started to thrive because of that. And so it's a very unique time, I think, in COVID to look at what's happening in terms of belonging and inclusion and being valued at your organization.
Yeah, I love that, Patty. And I think everything that you say is so spot on and so true. And again, I think it emphasizes why it's so important that interviewers are ready to tell real stories about how they've treated their employees over COVID and how they've made people feel valued and respected. Because more and more candidates want to hear real stories. And more they ask those questions in the interview. It's not just one way. They want to hear the interviewer's story. It's not just the interviewer hearing their story. So Patty, I really want everyone else to also have a chance to ask you any questions that they may have. And I'm just so grateful for the time that you've given us. I know you are so busy as that international author and sought after keynote speaker. So I'm so glad that we have you for the time that we do. And thank you for sharing not just your expertise, not just your knowledge, but really your heart. And again, you really are a living example for me of someone who lives what they study and what they speak about. Your confidence, your authenticity gives people the permission and the courage to be the same. So thank you. I know the world is a better place because of you.
Oh, thank you, Jane. Thank you for this incredible opportunity. This has been tremendous. It's been my super honor.